Onyx Ashanti é um músico que não se cansa de extrapolar os limites da tecnologia, experimentalismo e criatividade. Originário do Mississippi, com passagens por São Francisco, Nova York e Londres, hoje mora em Berlim, onde continua a desenvolver algumas de suas invenções, como o Exo Voice e o Beat Jazz Controller. Grande entusiasta do open source e impressão 3D, é conferencista em vários eventos como o TED Talk. Onyx teve parcerias com ícones da música mundial como Marshall Jefferson, Basement Jaxx e Soul II Soul.
Yeah, man, I'm excited to take this thing through it tonight. I just hope that all I really care about is if as long as the wireless works, I'm happy. Now this is a form now, so it's a biomechanical interface, so everything goes exactly where it's supposed to. Now when I go to trigger something, it's it's very sure. There's not that many mistriggers where you're pushing 2 or 3 things at the same time because of the placement. There's even a groove in here for where my thumb goes, so it doesn't slide around. It just kind of locks into that point. And if I move my hand, the thumb doesn't shift around onto the buttons. And it's interesting when you realize that it's all about the process, and it's not really about some end result where you win somehow. You know, if you win, you're probably dead. You know, nobody wins. You know, you just keep doing what it is that you do. And sometimes it's great, sometimes it sucks, and you just do it anyway. This whole thing is open source. That, you know, people can make a company if they want, have fun, because where I'm going, it has nothing to do with money. And I know exactly where. It's not like some vague, you know, wandering through the forest hoping that it works out. No, I know exactly where I'm going, and I want to make this what it is based upon the fact that we have access to technology that there are no experts. There's no like 3D printing expert that would say there was 3D printing back in the 60s and this is how we did it back in the old days. No. Maybe, you know, car companies had that shit, but there's no experts in this shit. And every time they add a new material, that's a new thing for everybody to learn. And there are people who work at it, but there's no like old guard, you know? There's so much new shit, and there's nobody to tell you, no, you can't do it like that. Nobody can say that shit because it's so new, they don't even know what you're doing. You know, or, you know, with some of the stuff that I see coming out of the internet now. You know, so I want to go that place. You gotta focus on the idea and making it and conveying it and expressing it. Whatever that idea, if you're not doing that, then you just get lost in the loud hum of 7.5 billion people. You know, you never know. This all prototype shit, so that shit can die. But I'm optimistic.
started with flute, then played sax, and then switched to wind controller in the early 90s. Back then, I had an idea for something like this. It wasn't wireless because nobody had wireless then. That was some magic shit, so nobody was really doing that much yet. You know, cell phones were as good as you got, pretty much. The instrument has been kind of in the background since probably the early 90s. But I made one version of it in 2007, and it was just, you know, pipe from the hardware store, and I drilled holes and put, you know, buttons in it and hooked it up to an Arduino, you know. Or about 3 years ago, actually, the Pure Data stuff started kind of kicking in, and I was able to start thinking more about actually designing something. You know, it was becoming, because at first I had the Touch OSC on an iPhone, and I had it on my hand, and I would use the accelerometer. That's how I kind of got used to programming for the accelerometer control. It started building momentum once the open source stuff was more prevalent, and you know, there was more tutorials for Arduino, and there was more stuff like that, so that I could go online and learn how to do it. There was nobody that did all the stuff that I wanted to see. You know, I wanted to see some like really outlandish shit, you know, and I didn't really see it. And so performing has its own aspects that are addictive. There's other things that I would like to do, you know, with it, you know, so that it's not, in other words, maybe making it not so much about being a musical form, but more about using the musical form as a way of interacting with data and interacting with the world somehow, you know. So right now it's I figure the more things I learn in different, you know, from different realms, you know, and then finding ways to interact with that information with sound, then I think that the sound can kind of communicate aspects of this, you know, this interaction. You know, it can represent it in a way that, if taken not in an entertainment context, but in a multi-dimensional context, dimensions of harmony, melody, rhythm, syncopation, you know, and then other abstractions on top of that. You know, you can, you know, I don't know what most of that even means, but it's interesting enough to make me want to go towards that. So using synesthesia, you know, a kind of a parameterized synesthesia, you know, that colors are associated with certain sounds, certain modulations, and certain gestures. So it's constantly, the colors constantly morphing and changing and whatnot. But the morphs and changes are directly related to something that is actually happening with the sound. You know, you create a kind of a form. You know, I have a robot that goes along with it as well, and it bends on 5 axes it moves, and so it gives me a representation of the sound that I would not perceive otherwise. It was really good, you know. It you know, it kind of gave you a different kind of a scope, you know, when you like, shit, what would I do with that, you know, kind of thing. Same thing with the 3D printer. It was cheap, and I can melt just about anything in that thing and make stuff, and I didn't have any scope for this type of a machine. I never even dreamed of it before. I think it was only maybe 2 months before I got it, I saw a bunch of 3D printers at the Maker Faire in New York. And I finally got to, you know, see a 3D printer, and I see it, and I'm like, and I pick up the stuff, and I'm like, this is actually kind of strong, because I always thought it was going to be like some shit, you know, but I was like, oh. And as soon as I felt that it was actually strong, you know, can make strong pieces, then I started thinking, you know, but I didn't have any scope. I didn't know anything about CAD design or any of that stuff. You know, I just knew that I wanted, now that I could do it, well, fuck, I want to make something with it now, you know. So there's all this, and there's new stuff, you know. There's all kinds of new stuff every day, and especially the open source stuff, the stuff that can kind of build a community and people can iterate it and it can grow over time. You know, strip away a lot of the existing meaning and construct a meaning based on parameters, based on intent being parameterized. So, you know, this is a certain sound, that's a certain sound, this does this, this does that, do this, change this, blah, 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 you know, and to kind of see where that goes and see how that connects, you know. That's what I'm seeing now as the thing that has to happen, is to really get it down to an evolving logic system. And I've only really gotten into that since I've started reading about fractals. So like that's something that like inspires me right now, like this mathematical language, you know, that also is tying together all of these different things. You know, everything is improvisation. So I only think about the interface. I don't think about what I'm gonna play. I practice. I make the sound as representative as possible based on what I know, you know. So I try to make sure that everything can, you know, things can fill a particular kind of a space. And then when I'm at a show, I just trust that I'm gonna play the right thing. Sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't, you know. It works like that sometimes, but any way it goes, it's much more interesting for me